to Double Bits Workshop. We're going to do another review today. This is a Rotary Tool Kit. It is a Wen brand, and I've been searching around for an additional tool. I do own a Dremel 100. Wonderful tool, no issues there, but oddly enough, to buy the attachment that I was looking for, which was a guide for the bottom to make it more like a palm router, it ended up being the same cost for the Dremel brand, which was $29.99, versus I was able to buy this entire rotary tool kit with an attachment for the front, and I trust this brand versus buying a cheap China little attachment that might work but would constantly get loose, is what I kept finding. All the $11 ones, $10 ones, whatever I ended up using, always seemed to have a review somewhere in there, or a video I finally was able to find of one of them getting reviewed that just seemed to never really hold. And at that point, if I'm spending half the price of getting an entire additional tool and all the attachments that I would like to get eventually for my Dremel at the price of one attachment for my Dremel, and I trust the brand, I'm more than willing to give it a shot. So we're going to go through doing a little bit of an unboxing. I kind of go over some of the specs and the reasons why I chose this brand in particular, and we'll do some mild testing and see how it comes out. So hopefully you enjoy, and let's get to it. Alright, so this is the Wen Rotary Tool Kit, or Dremel. Dremel is just better known. It's like how people usually like to say the KC lights rather than just saying a floodlight. Same basic premise. On this one, this is the model 23114. And let's get to go. This is how it shipped. This is how it came. It's a nice, tight, little, small package in a good way. And it looks like... Ah, yes. And there it is. That is oddly satisfying to look at. It is all right there. Let's do this in the first zipper. Oh, there it is. Nice. So one thing I wasn't 100% sure on when I was looking at the pictures, this is able to be purchased through Amazon. I need to set up an affiliate link and whatnot through that eventually. We shall see down the road. But in the pictures that I was able to see, they just splayed everything out, made it look nice, but I had no clue if it was just going to be a Ziploc bag full of loose bits. But it looks like it has a nice little case. You can kind of see everything in there. It's all pretty reasonable. The only odd man out was one bit. It looks like kind of came loose in shipping in the center there. I don't know if you can quite see it right there, but other than that, looks like we have everything here for polishing, mild sanding. Got our little diamond bit drill bits, or Dremel bits. Now, along with this purchase, my intended use and purpose of getting this was to also use it as almost like a mild CNC. I've been jokingly calling it the me-NC. Because just like doing the sign for my mother and also for my sister for Mother's Day, I have been enjoying that, but all the bits that I have are really large and won't actually get any fine detail. So as you'll see in those other videos, I had to use my Dremel with the diamond bit to get all the little articulate spots. So it occurred to me, why don't I just get an actual attachment, which eventually led to this purchase. And I ended up getting, for this, some basic cheap Tranray is the brand. These are 1/8 inch shank diameter carbide ball nose end mills. You would normally buy these to put in a CNC. So my thought process behind that was, and I've seen a few other people end up doing this, is using CNC bits in my Dremel, so that way as I'm going through it, I'm not using out little sanding bits, little diamond bits that are all meant to do a single, like, punch into a little hole or something to kind of sand something. It's not meant to bore through PVC, plastics, metal, or in this case, as I would use it, wood, and consistently go at a sideways push, versus a lot of these bits are only meant to have a mild amount of strain on the actual neck of the tool, and half the time end up snapping, breaking, warming up, overheating. So I thought I would get some tempered steel ones that are actually carbide, like the whole item is made out of carbide. So these weren't too bad. This was about, I think, $5, $6. So that's a separate purchase for my uses of it, but random side note. Alright, so our little bit kit in the front pouch here, which I actually like that. A lot of the rest of them use kind of like a little mesh in the back of it. Alright, here we have the actual, oh, this is actually a clear cellophane or plastic, which is nice. Instead of having the mesh that always seems to snag all your tool bits and then you end up tearing it. Alright, so this is what I thought everything would be coming in. Got a little Ziploc bag with some drill bits in it. I might check and see if these are end mill, otherwise these might just be drill bits. Nope. We have one actual end mill piece. You can kind of see from the top of it is not necessarily tapered to drill. Then you have 2 drill bits which are tapered for an actual punch in, versus this one is definitely an end mill for being able to run side to side. So that's cool. It did come with one. So we have 4 drill bits, or an end mill and a couple drill bits. We have our little tool for taking off the actual chuck or opening it up and closing it. And then it looks like we have, almost looks like an Allen key, but it's a rounded little shaft. I'll have to see what that's for. Not really sure. I will claim ignorance at this moment in time. Yeah, interesting. So it's just a little L shape, and it's a tube. Or not a tube, but just a little shank of steel. So that might be an attachment for something. Ah yes, and then we have the light. That was another feature that I enjoyed on this one, is that this is able to attach directly on the end of the rotary tool. Ah, here is the tool I was looking at. So this actually seems to be a lot better construction than some of the ones I had seen. So a couple of the ones I saw even had the depth gauge on it, and they may have been threaded on a few of them, but a few of them that I was looking at had a double on this little adjustment nut right here. So you would just kind of almost tighten it onto it without it actually working properly. So this is all threaded. Tip comes off. And it's not bad. That's kind of basic. And it looks like this just screws on. Nice! So that is the main primary purpose for purchasing of this tool. Plus I also kind of like the idea if it can stand. Oh. So it can't quite stand. You do have an angle here, so it will fall over. Not that that's a huge thing by any means. That was something I was kind of glancing at as an idea, so for organizing and whatnot. But this does have the back loop. So I think what I might end up doing for this, if it's not stored in its case or I'm consistently using it, is I was seeing a couple people who have these flex neck extensions, will hook it into it, and then have a little item that hooks onto a tabletop that this can kind of drape from. So that way you have freedom of movement without having this to just kind of sit off the side and get wiggled around as you're trying to use the flex neck. So we have the tool. Sorry, let me get all ADD here. We have the tool. Now this has the ability, let's see here, to go down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then max speed. So that's your adjustments on there. And this is a 1.4 amp model. There are 1.5 amp models, but the other reason I chose the Wen over those models was I have enjoyed and seen a lot better construction quality through Wen tools versus I can get a Cubeway or Poloni, I think it was, and a couple of the other kind of off-brandish, like China Direct models and whatnot. But looking at their build quality and just kind of seeing how some of those tools were, I actually got the ability to get hands-on with some of those back in the day when it was through a store called Sutherland's here in town. It's kind of a ma and pa version of a hardware store, and I think it was a franchise at one point. They ended up going under, but I do remember for a while they had some floor models of different tools, and I think they did have some Wen there for a little while. And just feeling the quality of it, sure it might have a stronger motor, but I'm giving up the fact that I'm getting a cheaper holder of that motor and just cheaper attachments. Everything just seemed to be as cheap as you could go with that still kind of fitting the niche to be called what you were trying to get in the first place, or just throwing a whole bunch of combos of kind of junk along with it. So this one actually had the attachments that I needed and had the things that I wanted additionally, or I found out later that I kind of ultimately wanted. And yeah. Alright, so it comes with a collet inside, a little guy in there. And then you have just your normal sleeve. I actually kind of like this. So on my Dremel, as most of you may have it as well, it'll have kind of like a cone on top, and then you have just 2 little indents for you to actually slide in the tool to break loose and move your, or remove your collet or change out your bit. This is actually a square. So you have 2 sides to pull from. On my other one, I actually started rounding out and destroying it. This actually has, on the 4 corners, kind of some grooves on it, so that way you can keep it from sliding the tool along it it'll actually kind of grip into that a little bit. Now granted, this will probably wear out eventually, but one of the additional attachments I'm looking at for getting for this is you can get, I believe it is a Wen brand or a couple other universal chucks that will attach onto here permanently, and then you can just screw and unscrew them just like the chuck on a drill. For any of your modern drills, that is, instead of the old school tools, or in this case where you actually have to lock it and use a tool. Now you can just kind of hold it, take that off, or you can lock it in and then hold that bit and screw and unscrew it in. And apparently it still works with the neck sleeve adjustment, but it can throw off your measurements if you were to follow it. Now granted, this is all plastic, so I'm not sure how 100% accurate this little gauge is. Can I get it to focus there a little bit maybe? There it goes. So there is an adjustment on here, and there is the ability to see, you know, what depth you're at. And that's all fine and well. But I don't know how much I would get thrown off, or if the chuck would fit through the hole. So those are some other additional curiosities I had, or if I'm going to have to try to slide this on, then attach that chuck. So we'll see down the road. This one right now currently, that little guy, you can kind of see it in there, does fit pretty well without any issue. I mean, granted, they're designed to go together. There we are. Yep, it just barely stays flush with the top there. Right. So this is a plastic, but it's at least a thick, sturdy plastic. I don't feel like if I grab the cone on this, I'm going to actually flex it at all. Like, this could take a serious amount of force and it doesn't actually flex, or feel like I'm going to snap this at all for the view finder on there eventually, or essentially. Let's see how this attachment fits. That's actually pretty slick. So it fits tight, it doesn't feel like loose, and it doesn't feel like I'm trying to force through some like gummed up cheap threads. It is all plastic. I'm not gonna say it isn't. And you do have a switch right here, but the switch doesn't feel super loose, or like if I'm bumping this or it's vibrating as I'm cutting through something, that is going to constantly go on and off for the light. But it is nice that if you have an overhead light source like I do, to have that little bit of extra light on the subject that you're working on, if you end up getting a little too intense or intent on what you're working on and end up covering up your light source. This will work out nice. I do not know what kind of batteries this has. It might just has 3 normal screws to take it apart and probably replace it. I'm guessing these are going to be like either an LR44, a little tiny cell. Can't imagine this could have any real thick pin battery types or little button cells in there at all. But here, keep holding on to that. Ah yes, so one of the other attachments comes in a little Ziploc bag here, which I think I'll keep it in, is this nice plastic little see-through window. So that way you can get close and look exactly at what you're seeing for what you're going through with the Dremel, but you don't have to worry about consistently getting excessive amounts of sawdust in your face as you're working with something, either at a high angle or just right at it and you're getting kind of intense with whatever you're working on. So there's one of those additional attachments. Kind of lay these out so you can see. That was an additional purchase. I'll set it off to the side for this review. So we've got the light, we got the little router attachment essentially, and a little viewfinder. This is the original cover for it. Let's slide that on so I don't lose it. And the actual tool. Here's the flex attachment. Now I've seen a few different ones of these in the past, and some of my concerns with them, that another reason I chose this one, is that this main neck attachment is all plastic on a lot of the other ones. This one is actually aluminum. And it is kind of knurled, 2 lines of knurling on there, so that way you can grip it. But it's a billet that actually has had multiple grooves on it. Now some may complain and say that seems a little more cheap or whatnot, but if, depending on what you're going to town on and cutting here and getting sawdust, all those little extra grooves is going to give you a little bit better grip to remove and replace this, as far as taking it off and putting on a different attachment. Now for the main part that actually goes into the unit and spins is just your standard kind of braided cable that comes into a square, and then has a little retention sleeve on there for a stop point. And that looks all on board, works out good. And it looks like if you hold this in place, this will give your attention to turn and take on or off to replace that. And it comes with a collet in it, so you don't have to worry about replacing those. And you do have a couple spare collets. It looks like just 2 of them in the actual kit. So if you lose either of those, or if you need to change the size on there, that'll all work in there. Has a little warning on here. 5 mil or 5 minute, 5 inch. Says on there. Metal ring, collet. Oh, okay, so you will need a collet for this bit, of course, onto your attachment. So this will have a collet in it, and then another collet at the end. So you'll still need to remain having the collet on this little rotary tool to attach this. Some did, some didn't have that. It was kind of an interesting toss-up. But this one, you're going to need to have your collet on there still to grasp on there properly. It has a pretty nice thick kind of rubber coating that over top of what is probably just a metal flex tube on the interior of that. And then we have springs on the end to help kind of with the tension and whatnot, which is good. A couple of them did, a couple of them didn't have that. And then this warning label just kind of lets you know you have to have the collet. Do not cross the flex shaft. Do not operate the flex shaft with a sharp bend. The recommended minimum radius is 5 inches. Oh, okay, so the radius is 5 inches. That's what it was. I was wondering if they were saying that's how thick it was. Don't mind me, I'm just not thinking for a second here on what I'm actually reading. Alright, installation. The metal ring on the inner core must be flush against the collet before tightening. Otherwise, the extra length of the inner core will generate excessive friction and heat. Oh, good to know. Lubricate the inner coil of your flex shaft after several hours of operation to prevent from overheating. Pull out the inner coil from the flex shaft. Apply an even coat of multi-purpose grease onto the entire surface of the inner coil. Insert the inner coil back into the flex shaft. Okay, so you can actually remove this and grease it, and it does look like it has some grease on there. I'm a guy, I sniff everything. That sounds odd, I know. But this definitely looks a little bit more of like a grease, but it has some kind of binder in it. So it's not just your basic, you know, from China, super cheap grease. This actually feels like a 3-in-1 or something. So it's a little bit higher quality grease they use on it to begin with, but it is nice to know you can remove that and then stick it back in there to work on it. There you go. So yeah, if you push it back in, definitely has retention. I'm feeling it turn on the tip of my finger, but I can remove it and it feels like entirely, and it'll just slide right back in. So you were able to, on a couple of the other models, remove the inner lining, but a few of the other models I was looking at for just buying this by itself, you couldn't remove the inner little twisted bit of steel and lube it at all. They would have to have like either a little hole in the side, or a couple of them were sealed. Now actually kind of reading this label, I see the reason why a few people suggested never to purchase a sealed system, because after long periods of use they'd usually burn up and not work again. Or if you could remove it and kind of grease it, it was the better of the two. So this comes with a removable greasable line, which is nice. So I'll kind of sit that, like, try to find a good spot for it. There. Alright, so that's everything there. We have our little variable rotary tool with case and flex shaft manual. Comes in its own little sleeve, which is nice. Alright, so yes, it looks like we have everything. Oh, figure 22, we'll see what that is. So on figure 22 is L-shaped tool. I gathered that. I'm just curious where you use that. Alright. 22, L-shaped tool. Used to lock the spindle of the flex shaft when changing bits on the flex shaft. Oh, okay. That makes a lot more sense now. So this little L-shaped tool on the flex shaft, you can kind of see there's a little tiny hole right there. See if it focuses on it. There we go. So there's a little tiny hole there, and you can kind of see as it spins around, exposes a little hole in there that this guy can slide into. And then you just hold that to the side so that you're able to replace any little said bit on there. I think I might actually figure out a way to maybe tie and lash this to there to where it just kind of hangs loose, or I might end up just getting it to where I can tape it or find some magnet nearby, because I feel like I'm going to lose that and it's going to be a pain down the road if ever I want to replace any bits on this. I do like that though. A couple of them used a button system, but everyone warned against those because apparently the buttons can either become partially engaged or they will just break after the first couple uses as it's vibrating as you're using it. Sometimes that button would get to be something that people would always rest their finger on as they're using the flex bit and it would snap, or it would just end up kind of getting partially engaged and jamming, or it would just break and then nothing would actually go in to stop this to replace bits on it. So that's kind of little bits that I was able to find looking around at other different rotary tools. Alright, so I think that's everything that comes in the kit. And it's actually, let's look at the case real quick. So we have thicker foam or interfacing in between the actual bits of material. It's a little bit of a stronger kind of generic material they use for most cases of anything, it feels like. I don't know the proper term for it, but if you've played around with tools or in construction, you know what I mean. As far as looking at the rest of the build quality, the only thing I kind of have a little bit of a quarrel of is your zipper. Feels nice and solid, but it's on the bottom. So if ever I'm working with this and I use it a lot and the zipper starts to slowly go with me moving it back and forth, that's kind of a little bit of a oddity. Like I said, it's nothing major. A lot of this I'm going to use here in the shop. I don't work in construction, so that's not a huge thing currently. I used to. But just kind of a side note, I kind of wish the zipper was on the top and then your handle was up there, so if you started to kind of feel the zipper move or something down the road, granted that's going to be like a year or two, hopefully, down the road. If you're consistently bringing this on and off job sites every single day, it'd probably take you a little less time than a couple years for the zipper to feel worn out to where you'd have to concern yourself or worry about that coming off the bottom. Granted, this is a $25 tool. If you're working in construction and you have to use a rotary tool every single day, you'll probably come up with something different, or more than likely, this is just going to end up in your toolbox, and then you'll have this just tossed in there with it. Not the always, like not few and far between have I seen a variety of actual like career individuals in any line of construction using these every single day to open and close. Very rarely. I myself did though. As much as I could. I always enjoyed having the little cases and such. But yeah, that is kind of the way that works. You do have extra cross stitch over top of this, and it is just kind of your standard handle material. A little bit of foam up there for a little bit of comfort. And that emblem actually feels like it is properly pressed and heated onto there, so you're not going to have that thing fleck off and just look nasty after a while. Not that you have to have it say Wen so amazingly in the front, but that actually kind of beats out some of the DeWalt tools I've purchased, Milwaukee, and especially Rigid. A lot of the Rigid tool bags, I don't know what it was or what they used on it, but a lot of times they either just got dingy really fast or they just kind of flecked off and fell off of it and it looked like just nasty. Granted, that's purely vanity. That doesn't actually hurt the tool whatsoever, but it is nice to know that even something just as simple as an emblem, they'll actually put a little time and effort into it, and a little bit better kind of adhesive. It's a lining around it. Yeah, side note. Anyway, yeah. So this is the Wen 23114, or 14, as I was thinking at the end there. And it is a 1.4 amp speed on number 1. Let's kind of go over that real quick. So the speed on the number 1 setting is 8,000 RPMs. On absolute all the way out max, which is technically 7 because you can't put it to the 6th setting, but you can go up to max. The max setting is 35,000 RPMs. So very decent. And just a standard 120 volt, 60 hertz motor in it. So you're not going to worry about tripping a breaker or anything if you have this going with a dust collection system or just a shop vac or something like that. Or if you are working on a remote location with a generator, this is all good information to kind of have for a variety of individuals that I have known as well, that are always the type that get on the job site first time they break ground, and you're not always near a city or an outlet, so half the time if you are in those types of crews you end up working off of generators. So kind of little tidbits and good things to know. And looking at the attachments and other kits you can get, I was looking at this one in particular and enjoying the facets of it being a little bit more powerful of a motor. You can get, I think, one more step up in Wen. It's a little bit more powerful, but it didn't come with any of the additional like flex attachments or this little guy. Like I said, primarily the reason I was purchasing it for my purpose. But you got a lot larger bit count and you had a more professional solid case with it. But the other things I was looking at is I don't have a huge amount of space in the shop. I'd kind of like that larger kit, but I feel this is a lot easier to toss in a vehicle if I'm going to go over to a friend's house or a family member or whatnot, or if I do get a little job of some kind on the side. This is a lot easier to bring out to work on fine, little decorations or something like that, or if I'm trying to do some little trim work and try to get something kind of routered out. If I can't quite fit a router in there, I can use this to kind of finalize and fix something out there at a friend's house, or like I said, if somebody did hire me for something. But yeah. So this has been the first initial unboxing, but let's do a little test run with this. Let's see how this little guy does on the test sample real quick, now that we've kind of just done a lot of time on the unboxing part. So I grabbed some safety glasses, kind of set up a few little test runs here. So I have some basic pallet wood, my primary item I'll be using. Some hardwood, I think this one is a, I can't tell exactly, but it's some hardwood that I had sitting aside. This kind of gives a good hard test on a few different things. Making a few cuts on this definitely makes quite a bit of my machinery work hard on it. I'll have to look into it and see exactly what it is, but we have a hardwood, some more actual refined or sanded pallet wood again. This one should be, I think this is pine. And then I have some Japanese cedar, I think is what this is, what we can kind of tell. This is that one, like I said, if you yourself know in the comments at all in my prior video to let me know, but as far as I can kind of tell, looking through, talking to some friends, it kind of looks a lot like Japanese cedar. So that is what that is, and it's a bit more rough and furry, so we'll see how a lot of the bits like that. And we'll just kind of run through, do a little few tests, see if we can get this motor to get bogged down, or if it'll seem like it's just going to be a champ to go through all of it just fine. We'll try out going in with just some of these little drill bits here first. It's just the first thing I kind of grabbed at. Get it opened up. So it feels nice so far. Just kind of putting a bit into it. Locking mechanism seems pretty good and stout. Doesn't feel like it's gonna pop loose real easily. And yeah, all right. Turn that all the way down real quick. So we have an on-off switch here and then a speed. So kind of a low speed. So far just using a drill bit attachment and just keeping it on a speed 3. On speed 1 it seemed to kind of bog out, just kind of going into the Japanese cedar. Going through some polished pallet wood here, or pine. Seemed to just kind of, a little bit of pressure and then just bit right in. Going on to the hard material, it actually seemed to bite really well, and I didn't hear the system kind of bog down much at all. In fact, let's try that one on max. I have to say, that actually makes me feel like it's giving my Dremel a run for its money a bit. That was really nice. Went in, no issues, no complaints. Motor didn't really overheat or warm up at all. I haven't really put it through its full-on paces at all yet, but it seemed to go right into most anything that I was working on real quick and easy. Bit's not even really that hot. Nice. Alright. I'll try this end mill bit. Use some of the pre-existing holes and try that out. And we're actually going to try that attachment. Since I've been so curious about this one. Alright, so I was noticing this at first when I tightened this in. It seemed like it almost threw it off key, but it's actually meant and designed, it looks like, so that as this tightens in and it pulls it, it actually levels out the bit, which is nice. The cupping doesn't seem warped at all, which is good. It's a little bit of flex. Let me drop that down. There you go. Seems pretty solid. So it's kind of grabbing and being a little funky, but I also wasn't really stabilizing too much. I was just kind of letting the blade do the cutting. Let's try this hardwood real quick. And I am biting in a pretty good decent amount. Grab a tape measure here real quick. Since this is a longer bit than kind of what's going off of here, it's going to be kind of hard to judge what they intend for that to be. I'm thinking this is the measurement of distance from the actual little collet on there is what this is meant to be. So I'm at 1/4 of an inch of actual penetration for this individual bit. Kind of judging a bit where that is. That is 1.5 inches from this top to this bottom here, and that's right where the collet starts. It's like right there. And let's see if I up that just a little bit to where that matches instead of being right at the tip of it. Okay, so that looks to be the dimension from this top point to here. So your absolute 0 is, I'm guessing, what they were intending for that purpose to be. So if I make that go to 0, that doesn't flush out that bit, but alright. So I'm not quite sure exactly what they're intended for there. If you do know, feel free to leave that in the comments. Otherwise, we'll see, and if I figure it out by the end, I'll let you know. Alright, so everything's still tight, no issues, nothing going loose. Let's try some hardwood. Besides hitting that really loud, whiny pitch, like what happens with my router on occasion, when I'm going through and biting a bit of material off, we don't really have any like excessive burning or anything. There's a little bit of a darkish line on the side there, like I started to warm it up when I was holding the bit in one spot, or pushing really hard. But otherwise, I'm not seeing any real like burning through rather than cutting through of the wood. And going through on this pine here, it kind of bit and wanted to just go through it, and as you were kind of hitting different harder parts of the wood, it would kind of take a little bit and then it would go right through it. But just kind of adjusting and working as you would with any tool, I'm not seeing any strain on this. Alright, let's try a different attachment here. And also a different bit. Let's swap out bits. Where did I put that? Of course. It's right in front of me, so of course I couldn't see it. Alright, so let's try something out of the kit. Let's try, not necessarily meaning to test the bits. These look to be just kind of your run-of-the-mill bit set. It's nothing too extravagant, so each of these should perform just fine. I'm more or less testing the tool, because this is going to be just like any other little Dremel kit from the looks of it. So I'm not really testing the strength or endurance of these for the most part, but we'll still kind of run through and see how the rotary tool itself kind of fares. So I'll try working with, what would be good? Try just a basic sander bit, or a little grinder disc style. This is actually a cone. So again, this has got mild amount of heat, nothing really hot on it or anything like that. We use this guy to kind of be a dust shield or shroud. And it looks like, tighten that down. And then this is movable but still has tension, so that way wherever I put it, it'll stay. So a little dust shield essentially. Alright, so I'll try sanding the edge of just a pine. Something a little bit more rough would probably be something you'd be trying to get the edge down on using one of these little grinder attachments. So just not even applying any pressure, just letting the unit's own weight sitting on it, it kind of just went through, no issues, no hassles. Let's try it on the pine. I have a tendency to always just crank things to the fastest it'll go and just start working with it, but let's slow it down a little bit. So that dust shield is definitely working pretty good. There's a decent amount of dust that was being kept from going near my eyesight, and it didn't seem to gum up too fast and was diverting a lot of it down. So as I was working with it, or as I just kind of turned it and started working it a little bit, I definitely noticed a good deal of difference. So it's definitely a worthwhile attachment. And even if you were just to get that one attachment, so far it looks like it'd be worth the money. Probably a little $5 attachment or something. I don't know how much this little piece by itself would cost, but as far as on this kit, I have to say that is a winner. Alright, let's see. What else we got here? Here's a little interesting bit. So this is just a firm brush. So let's see with that one, cleaning out some of that sawdust I left in that hole. Alright, that worked out phenomenally well. Instead of having to use an air compressor or something, if I'm working with some kind of glue or something on the side and I just wanted to real quickly and finally just kind of literally high-speed brush something out of the way without it worrying about it getting into glue or something. Or a more delicate situation. I have never thought to use a little Dremel brush before, and it came in the kit. I might actually end up using that through a lot of my projects. That is a nice little attachment. And using it at a low RPM, so I'm not just absolute going crazy throwing dirt and dust everywhere. But nice, very nice. Alright, what else can we test in this little guy? Let's do basic little drum sander, the bit that was rattling around. So this is the small little drum sander they come with on the kit, and I'll use a little dust shield, and it just slides right over the bit. Super nice. I'll just sand the corner of that again. Oh, that gives me an idea. Hang on. Creativity is going in my head here a little bit. So if I use a little drum sander bit, and actually I don't know why I keep taking that off. It's got a nice swoop on one side, so I technically should be able to pop loose a little collet and drop a bit and swap bits without having to take this off every time, but I just feel like I need to. It's just in me a bit. Alright, let's do this guy. Kind of little bulb, or pointed bulb, kind of looks like a Christmas bulb, this little guy here. It's one of the little diamond bits. Let's throw that one on. And let's do a little drawing here. Oh wait, I know what to do with this. So instead of using this little attachment here, I'm going to swap over to that flex hose. Let's try that flex hose out real quick. So to use this one, use the flex attachment, I had to actually use a pair of pliers to get in to grab it, just because I had pushed it in. You slide down until it hits the top of the little collet there. Tighten that down. Then this little sleeve slides on and screws onto, just like the rest of the attachments. So we'll see about a holder down the road, but right now I'll do kind of like I was saying. I kind of don't want to, just leave it on the table. So that works good. So I need a little hole here. Which, look at that, the hole just lined up perfectly. Alright. Alright. Interesting. I've actually yet to use a little flex line like this before, so I've got a hook-ish. Kind of hook him up over there. Shift it up a little bit. I'm using the right bit here for what my brain is thinking. And that hole keeps lining up perfectly. Unintentional. I don't think I could replicate it if I wanted to. Let's swap bits real quick. Hop over into this one, cone. So after an extended amount of use, or just time, just kind of spent there for a second, it did start to warm up a little bit on the flex bit, which I think any of them would. It's consistent friction kind of going through there. Set that off to the second there for a sec, or set that off to the side for a second. Nothing spectacular, so I'll mess with it later, but I made some little Dremel marks using this little sanding attachment here, and it just immediately made me think of a little skull. So I had to throw on just a little tiny cartoonish skull, and the wood grain was kind of pulling me all around there a little bit. It's a lot harder wood here than it is out here, but just kind of playing around with some of the attachments. Seems to work good with the little flex attachment. And the other one, which I'm betting would probably be just fine. Kind of take a look here real quick. So, pull that out a little bit. Alrighty. Try some of those end mills we got. No, I'll try this other one. Too small. So the first collet it comes with just uses all the general sizes, but the other collets they sent with, let's see. Ah, yes. So the other two collets they sent go down to a super tiny small size, and then a little bit smaller size than the collet it comes with, because all your general use items that you have in throughout, not that this one is one, are all of the same thickness. So actually, in theory, you could. So if you end up losing that little L shape, any one of the attachments therein slides and works just perfectly in the hole, so that way you can still utilize this if you were to lose that, like I fear I might in the future. Just me knowing me, even this is a tiny shop, I could still lose stuff easily, especially if I take this anywhere else for whatever reason. Side note. But otherwise, there are smaller collets for the smaller drill bit and some of the other smaller attachments that you can get for it. So they're not just straight replacement ones, they're actually for varying sizes. So you have your normal size, a little bit smaller, and then absolutely tiny little collet for the unit. So that's all good to know. Let's try kind of freehanding this real quick, using that same kind of end mill bit that it came with, and the light. Try that one out. So leaving that light on. I can still easily change my attachment out. Let's try a little brush again, see what we got going here. And that's some dust. So working on hardwood, pine, just kind of playing around a little bit. When it was going into the hardwood, it was kind of making a little bit more of a shrieking noise. I don't know if I'll leave that in or not. But in inspiration of that, I decided to make a little screaming face. So, really hard wood. Like I said, this is probably a elm something. I know it's not oak because I'm allergic to oak, and so far this dust hasn't caused any kind of itchiness or anything like that. I do have a Japanese elm, from what we can tell, that came out of our backyard. Try some of that. I know that is some seriously hard wood. It is a pain to work with. Alright, so let's try removing some bark with a little sander guy. And swap over to my little dust bit, we'll call it. A little dust shield. We didn't start the fire. I really don't want to burn down my shed. Workshop, brother. Well, the grinder was kicking in there. Alright, let's go into that same old Dremel bit, or end mill bit. Keep going back to it. I really like that one. Actually, it's really good. Alright, so I was curious, I actually pulled out my Dremel. So I do have just the normal Dremel, and here's the Wen. This is the Dremel 200 series, so my apologies, it's the 200, not 100. And it just has a low and high speed. Nothing super fancy, pretty good little motor on this one. This is the 1.15 amp, so that's actually more powerful than this one. And I've used this one a whole bunch. No, actually in the high speed is 1.15 versus in its low speed it only uses 0.8 amps versus that is 1.4. This does 15,000 up to 35,000. So in its low speed it's still going faster than that in its low speed, and then its top speed is the same top speed but less amperage of what it can actually put out. So this is what I was talking about. So your little sleeve is all metal, it's knurled on the sides, and then it's just two flat points. And that's the original one, and I've definitely kind of wore through it a bit. So I'll kind of unscrew that a bit. We'll just kind of utilize a couple of the same little tests here, using the same bits. They're all universal for the most part. I actually slid off the sleeve to see if it'll actually thread on here. Let's look at that before I try to force anything. So from the looks of it, no, threads are going to be different. So this has only got 3 threads versus has 4 threads. So the pitch is going to be completely different. So it can't just screw on there. So that's where you'd want probably the Dremel brand. So that little difference right there is the whole reason I purchased that kit over buying the attachment I was looking at buying just for this one. So the little sleeve isn't even going to fit, or any of the other attachments. Not that I need my Wen attachments to work with my Dremel brand, but there's always that curiosity to it. Alright, let's try this one out real quick. Just a couple of tests. So this one definitely has a little bit more heft and feel, and it is of course visually bigger than the Dremel 200. Both of them have the same little ring attachment here. Nothing too sensational about that. The ergonomics and feel of this one I actually do prefer over the Dremel because I have a bit more grip. I do a little bit larger hands than some people, but not bad. As for this one, it's just your general run-of-the-mill. Ergonomics overall aren't bad. Nothing wrong with that. This one does feel a bit more like I have to put a little bit more grip onto it versus if I put too much grip, I almost want to run with a smaller amount of fingers, a little less control, almost like I'm trying to run a pencil. I did find a lot that I actually ended up hitting that switch when I wasn't paying attention, bumping into it when I'm trying to press onto it, almost like I'm using a pencil or something like that, or a pen. So that did kind of bother me with this one. That, or when I would just start getting into whatever I was doing, I'd somehow rotate, and it always seemed to kind of like kick it into a lower gear because I'm like trying to hold it as I'm pulling against. Little things, but as far as ergonomics go, I actually do really like this trigger bing right here, because I feel if I turn it on, I'm not necessarily going to have a good chance of bumping it, and there's enough real estate here that it would take a bit or an odd hold on this for me to actually adjust the speed or turn it on and off while just utilizing the tool. And after all that testing and everything, this didn't warm up much. And the Dremel 200 didn't really warm up too much, but because I'm so close to the motor, I felt all the heat that this generated off of just a few holes being drilled with the same attachment. They feel about on par for warmth, which is interesting. So after all of what you've seen me do, little drawings, all that different stuff on hardwood and softwood, we're doing just kind of literally kind of piddling around. It seems like this little guy might actually warm up faster. Let's try the hardwood real quick. I don't know if you heard it, but I still ended up happening to bump that just lightly, and it made a change in octave as I'm hitting it. So I've had this one for quite a while. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a great little unit. Like I said, if you want to buy name brand, or at least what's known brand and readily available at Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart now, this is your most common name that you hear, and a lot of times what people end up calling most of the attachments for a rotary tool is a Dremel. And I was part of that same kind of trend and idea too. And it is warm, very warm. Yeah. Just doing a couple holes and stuff, and it never really got much warmer than that, but it is interesting now, having felt that one, there's a little bit more real estate and a little bit more venting. This one still has some good venting on it, but this one seemed to definitely, I could feel what heat it generated a lot faster, versus this had to take time to warm up the whole unit before my hand actually was able to feel what the motors probably had as the same heat for quite a while. I can feel a few different build quality things. These seem to be on par. This one's definitely got more of a mass production feel. So your two caps for your brushes, I did always notice this one always had like a gap on the bottom. Nothing major, but the caps always seem to be kind of a cheap plastic, versus these are actually like metal. These are actual metal caps versus this is cheap plastic that last two times I took out to clean my brushes felt like they were going to snap, or that they were warping over just heat. Kind of interesting. I didn't do a full-on side-by-side comparison of it, and I could do that down the road, kind of do some little more stress testing, but just a general feel, I like this one a lot better. That switch is a lot more pronounced. It is plastic, but it still felt just as strong beneath the plastic, like I'm still pushing on a rod of steel, versus this little rod of steel is hot. So after just a few uses, that ambient heat is spread into the metal switch that my finger now has to depress and push on. So if I'm working with this Dremel for quite some time, I think in their later models there's a few more comforts added to that, to where you didn't have that immediate heat going right to your thumb. But she's a little warm, and you just saw what I did. There's not much. I'm not fully trying to knock on that by any means, but it is interesting now that I hold this different tool in my hand to see the changes and differences. Well, there was a quick, or kind of more of an in-depth look into the Wen Rotary Tool, model number 23114. It's a good kit from everything I've been able to see, for everything that it comes with. The test that I'm more particularly interested in knowing if it'll work on, which is the woodworking side of things. I didn't really go in depth on how it works against steel or a variety of other things. General needs and purposes of the tool, I feel that it fills the niche that I was needing filled quite nicely. And even though I was originally just aiming to get this bit here for a couple of upcoming projects, including one I'm going to get commissioned to do by my brother, it fits the bill perfectly. It's going to do everything that I want it to do, and it seems to have a very nice strong motor. And it, as I was reading off from the Dremel that I had, has a stronger motor than my Dremel. So for what I was going to try to push my Dremel to do, it would have probably ended up making the bits run a little slower, do a little bit more burning of wood than cutting of wood, for a lot more of the signs and things that I look to do in the future for it. I didn't quite go too in-depth on the whole metal side of things. I get that. I could do a little bit more of an in-depth or more of a stress test on that. If you guys want to know, I can just do kind of a quick update video on it, or just kind of a retouch or a rehash on it to see exactly a little more refined in that area. If you guys were to ask that of me, I could take a look into that. I don't want to break the tool by any means. I want this tool to last me a long time. I feel this tool will last me actually as long, if not longer, than my Dremel. Just for a few of the little pieces that I was noticing on it, like my brush little covers here, right, that also retain the brushes, are metal. Something I didn't think about. And some of the inner workings of it, this is a plastic fan, same as that one, for cooling down the unit. but seeing a lot of the other components that hold the motor, not only is it a stronger motor, it's also a little bit better encapsulated in steel, so I feel it's going to last a little longer than some of the plastic components on the Dremel. It does everything I want it to. For a little bit more in-depth, I'm going to be doing a little bit more wood carving and whatnot with it as well, and the attachments and assortments are a lot better quality than I was expecting for the primaries. As far as the toolkit goes, it's Dremel or rotary tool bits. They're all kind of that same quality. They don't feel any better or any different, so they're kind of indifferent, but it is nice to see the variety of them at least. So you have your diamond bits, your grinder bits, your polishing wheels. I didn't do any polishing on anything. I didn't have anything to polish them on, but I believe those will do a great job on future axe videos I have coming up. They're going to do better on future knives and different things that I'm also going to be kind of restoring or polishing up, and different tools for their maintenance. I'm going to utilize some of these tools to help maintain those tools. So it's going to have a lot of purposes here in the good old wood shop. And I love that flex attachment. I'm probably going to end up having a variety of hooks around the workshop that's going to allow that to hang perfectly where I'm going to be using it mostly and where I'm going to want it to be. So all in all, very good things. It turned out to be just exactly what I wanted, and all the little bits there in between. I needed that Dremel back in the day, and it's a good product. Nothing wrong with Dremel for by and large. But their name brand is definitely that. It is a name brand, and if I was to be sponsored by them, I wouldn't have any issue with it, but I'd know the price tag that comes with it. So as with any tool, this one seems to be a good one in the lineup, and its uses and purposes fit mine perfectly, and I feel it would actually have good enough strength test to be able to stand up to Dremel without having to drop the name on the price on the name. And just seeing different things for the threads, this is more, will fit a lot of the universal tools I found. So a lot of the universal Dremel attachments that require the thread on the top, or require this and that and the other thing to be replaced on it, it can do it, versus you have to buy an adapter to adapt your adapter for some of the Dremel stuff, because Dremel has done that. They've made their name, and they've made a niche for it, so they're going to make sure that you have to buy their brand to continue using it. And there's some universals that work, but even the router attachment I was looking at that hooks into that one that's $30, some people were reporting on different brands and different models of the Dremel itself don't quite fit in there exactly. That was what really ended up sealing the deal for me to want to buy a completely different kit for just a simple attachment, was that the universals don't fit on that one, and even the one that says Dremel was reported to have a few times where it had manufacturer defects, or just certain models of the Dremel brand don't actually fit in there quite exactly. And I couldn't find an exact picture of the 200 fitting in there exactly, so it kind of made me leery to want to spend $30 on it and see for myself if it was garbage or if it would actually work for my needs. I mean, the extra stabilizing hands and everything seem to be a good thing, but I think this will be able to fit my needs just perfectly, because I'll probably use a router to take out the large chunks, and then all the finite detail is going to be used with that little guy. And I think it's going to fit the bill perfectly. With a little case, everything's just the way it needs to be. So hopefully you enjoyed it. It's a lengthy one. Each of my tool reviews are a bit more lengthy, but I hope it gives you a little bit better insight and idea into how the tool would work. If you were to take this on a job site, I feel the case would handle perfectly fine. If you're a little bit more klutzy, or if this is beating around, I would just check the zipper, because it being on the bottom just seems to be something that I feel you would have stuff fall out of if you were to just carry it and not realize it got unzipped or wasn't fully zipped. That being said, I feel the zipper, one-handed unzipping and zipping, that's something that can't always be said. The way it's sewn and everything, it actually zips and unzips perfectly one-handed, versus, as you know, a lot of times with other tool bags and whatnot, it's so loose and floppy that you have to like help hold and substantiate on each of the corners, and certain people just kind of get used to that. And that's a lot of times why people buy the hard cases, is literally they just hate the zippers for some of the DeWalt and Makita tools, and especially even Ryobi's too, where it's just a little bit more of a loose sack. Nothing wrong with that for this application, but otherwise I actually like the little extra interfacing, and it actually has a bit more of a stiff piece in the back of a spine for it, and everything fits in the case nice and neatly, and I don't have the weird mesh on the inside. I actually like this kind of more plastic here, versus having all the little loose mesh that they always put in a little fishnet that everything seems to get attached and hooked into, so when you go to pull it out, it just rips the whole fish netting. I think that was a extra thought went into that, which is nice. And the attachments can fit within as well as the Dremel itself. And I like that there's a separate pocket for the bits to go on the outside. So to answer all those simple questions that everyone seems to have right off the bat in any review video, would I purchase it again? Well, I haven't put it through its paces, but I feel full-heartedly I'd be more than happy to hit that buy again button for someone else's birthday or need that came up and needed one, and I felt the need to purchase one for them. I would buy this kit for $25. It's right up there with anything you would find at Home Depot or Lowe's, and I feel that this is on par with all the extra accoutrements that you would get at Harbor Freight even, which is nice to be able to save for a Harbor Freight price. I mean, $25 is a little more expensive than their $17.99 kit, and they have coupons for days on all of that stuff. It has its own market, and they're good tools, nothing wrong with that whatsoever. I just am enjoying the Wen brand with my bandsaw and some of the other stuff I've been looking around at potential future purchases and whatnot. So it's a good bang for your buck, and I would utilize and use all the bits. I don't think there's any one bit that's more cheap or easy to like throw away and be like, oh, you know, it's great except for this one part. I feel I would utilize all that came with it, and I'll probably build a stand for it or something down the road. We'll see. All right. Hopefully you enjoyed this, and hopefully gave you the answers you needed. If you have any more little questions here and there on the tool or the bag or any of the accessories or any of the materials that can go in and throughout, like I said, I can do a follow-up video for any of them. If you haven't already as well, be sure and hit the like button, subscribe, make sure you hit that notification bell so that way you get notifications each time I come out with another tool review, another build video, or anything under the blue moon, sun, or sky. I think this will be a good addition to my tool lineup, and I'm happy with the purchase. So thanks again. Hopefully you enjoyed. Have a good day.